On November 25th, 2010, three brothers headed to their father's house to spend Thanksgiving with him. The next morning, their mother reported them missing after they failed to return home. Their father continued telling lie after lie about his son's whereabouts. The children have never been found, and police were unsuccessful in proving their theory that the father killed his sons and disposed of their bodies. Welcome to Without a Trace. I'm your host, Jolynn. Every file holds a mystery. Every story deserves to be heard. This is Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton's story. Tanya and John met after being introduced by one of John's cousins. The two married in 2002 and shared 3 children together. Andrew, who was born on November 20th, 2001, Alexander, born on November 4th, 2003, and Tanner, born on October 20th, 2005. John and Tanya both had previous marriages. Tanya's former husband filed for divorce shortly after she was charged in a criminal sexual conduct case. Tanya had 2 daughters, which the former husband received custody of. John had spent time in jail in 2009 for failing to pay child support to his previous wife for their daughter. In 2010, the couple separated, and on September 13, 2010, Tanya filed for divorce. She asked for custody because John was a long-haul truck driver, causing him to be gone for long periods of time. She also asked for alimony and child support when she filed for divorce. The day that Tanya filed for divorce, John picked up Andrew and Alexander from school and texted her from Ohio saying he was taking them to Florida. John was convinced to return the boys, but he evidently changed his mind as later that day he picked up the boys at home and drove to Florida with them. The custody fight continued to be nasty. On September 27th, John filed a motion for custody saying his wife was a registered sex offender. Tanya had pled guilty to 4th-degree criminal sexual conduct as a plea bargain. She was accused of having sex with a 14-year-old boy in 1998. Tanya has repeatedly denied abusing her own sons. Tanya continued having custody of the children, and John had been having visits with them without issue. At the time, John was living in the family house, while Tanya and the children were living with family members only a few houses away. John had begged Tanya to let him have the boys for Thanksgiving. She finally consented, but advised that John needed to have the children back during the evening hours of Thanksgiving. According to court documents, John had manipulated Tanya into allowing the boys to spend the night with him, stating that he would have the boys back to her the next morning. The morning of Black Friday, John drove to a family member's residence and asked for a ride to the hospital after breaking his ankle. He told hospital workers that he injured his ankle while trying to commit suicide by hanging. The boys were not with him when he went to the hospital. Shortly after, John began getting phone calls from Tanya asking when he would have the boys back to her. His first lie came when he stated the boys were with a friend of his, and this friend would return the boys to her. He later stated he didn't know where the boys were because he wasn't sure who had them. Tanya eventually stopped hearing from John, so she went to the house, but no one was home. Tanya called the authorities and reported the children missing due to John's changing stories. In the hours to follow, the authorities began searching for the missing children. Authorities obtained a search warrant for John's residence. Upon entering the house, police found that John had essentially destroyed everything in the house. They located the rope from his suicide attempt hanging from a stair banister. They also noted they found several cut toe straps. Police removed items from John's home, but never publicly announced what they took. When John was interviewed by authorities, he had a new story. John told police that he handed his children over to a woman named Joanne Taylor because he didn't want the children in the home when he attempted suicide. He didn't know Joanne, but had met her when she had car trouble on the side of the road. Authorities completed an exhaustive search for any woman going by this name, but the efforts were unsuccessful. John later shared that he gave the boys to an underground group to keep them away from Tanya, as he felt she was a danger to the children. Police records helped authorities place John on the day after his boys were last seen. According to Michigan State Police, his phone pinged him in Holiday City, Ohio, about 20 miles from his home. His phone was then shut off and remained off for over 2 hours. When his phone was turned back on, John was back in his hometown. The cell phone records suggest that John's trip started at 4:29 a.m. and ended at 6:46 a.m. It was a few hours after John's phone was turned back on that he drove to a family member's house asking for a ride to the hospital. In the days following the boys' disappearance, John was in the hospital being treated for mental health issues, while hundreds of people gathered to search for his children. On November 28th, planes and search dogs were used to search areas along the Michigan-Ohio border. Hundreds of volunteers searched fields, farmland, and wooded areas, with no luck. On November 29th, parental grandmother Roxanne said she believed the boys were alive and that her son had nothing to do with their disappearances. She spoke to a local news station about her belief that an unknown person had the boys, saying, quote, "My message to them is to bring the boys home or to take them to a place of safety with a message that says, 'I am a missing child, dial 911. My heart tells me they're okay.'" Roxanne felt certain that John had nothing to do with their disappearances because when she saw the children last with John in August, she sensed no trouble. Roxanne is quoted saying, "He loves his sons more than his own life, probably. He is not a bad boy, he's a good father." During the first few months of the boys' disappearance, hundreds of tips were received. One by one, authorities investigated these tips, but they were all unfounded. In February 2011, authorities started treating the case as a murder investigation. They believed John had killed his sons and disposed of their bodies. John was arrested and charged with 3 counts of unlawful imprisonment, a punishment police said would give them time to pursue murder charges. In September 2011, John stood before a judge and pleaded no contest to all 3 counts. Court documents alleged that John searched online about how to break a neck a week prior to his son's disappearing. He was found guilty and sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison. John is currently incarcerated at the Bellamy Creek Correctional Facility in Michigan. John indicated to authorities he had a vision of the boys being put in a dumpster in an area in Ohio. Authorities conducted an exhaustive search of dumpsters and landfills in the area, but nothing substantial was found. In 2018, John spoke with a local news station telling them that he gave the boys to 2 women and a man in their 60s. The group planned to take the boys to a farm along the Ohio-Indiana border. Years later, John randomly brought up the boys in conversation with authorities. This was the first time John ever initiated conversation with the police. He told authorities they needed to find Mose Gingerich, saying the people who had the boys told him that Mose could bring them back. Mose was excommunicated from the Amish community and was on a few different reality TV shows in the early 2000s, talking about the Amish lifestyle. He and his wife had a boarding house for people who wanted to leave the Amish community. He assisted these individuals in learning technologies and helped them integrate into mainstream society. Police were able to track down Mose, but he told them he had never heard of John and he didn't believe the Amish community would have the boys. He explained the Amish community would not engage in something like this as it would be impossible for the community to keep something like this quiet for so many years. The Amish community would not want the spotlight that the police and media would bring from engaging in something of this magnitude. Mose agreed to come to the prison and meet John in hopes of finding the boys. Upon seeing Mose's face, John immediately became visibly disturbed and acted as if he would become ill. Later, John admitted this story was yet again another lie. He had recently gotten access to television in prison, and at the time, Moses' TV series was being aired. John's family had stuck by him despite his changing stories, but in 2018, that changed. In the summer of 2018, John's father, John Sr., his mother, Roxanne, and sister, Lucinda, visited him in prison. After that visit, they said they would never go back. John Sr. felt his son was not sharing everything he knew about the boys' disappearance, saying, quote, "He's hiding information. Well, I'm not going to say he's not telling the truth. I think he's telling the truth, but the whole truth, the whole story of things concerned, he's hiding." John Sr. ended his visit with his son by voicing his opinions and telling him it's time to tell the whole story. John Sr. explained, quote, "He's stubborn in some respects, and I think he's scared in other respects, and he wasn't going to open up to me. The other things about it, which if he had, I think we would have cleared up a lot of things and gotten a lot of extra help, but he wasn't ready to do it at that point. When I walked out of the room, I guess he kind of started to break down a little bit about the whole thing." John Sr.'s attitude on this day was very different compared to when he first spoke to a local news station in October 2017, when he said, quote, "I don't care how drastic things could have gotten in his mind, he would not have hurt the boys." In September 2018, authorities received a promising lead. Workers cleaning out a shed in Missoula, Montana, found a box of teeth and bone fragments from 3 male children. The Michigan State Police reached out to investigators in Montana saying, quote, "Listen, we have these 3 missing boys about the same age as the bones are. Let's get these tested right away." It was quickly determined that the boys did not belong to the Skelton boys, as testing proved the bones to be more than 99 years old. John was first eligible for parole in 2020, but his request was denied. In 2021, he declined an interview with the parole board. He has since placed numerous requests to be paroled, but all have been denied. In August 2023, the Michigan Parole Board voted to permanently deny John's request for parole. Tanya responded to the parole board's decision, quote, "I am pleased by MDOC's decision to deny parole for the remainder of John Skelton's sentence. Even though it is only going to be about 2 years until they would have to release him, at least I know that we don't have to go through the stresses of him possibly being granted an early release due to parole." While John has been incarcerated, authorities have tried to speak with him several times, but each time John would not discuss anything related to locating his missing children. All of John's phone calls and written correspondence while in prison have been closely monitored, but there has never been any mention from John or anyone he is communicating with as to the whereabouts or well-being of the children. John has never shown any emotion when his children are mentioned in conversation. In December 2003, Tanya filed paperwork to ask the Lenawee County Probate Court to declare the brothers legally dead. In Michigan, a person is typically considered to be dead after they have been missing for 5 years. Tanya wrote in a statement, quote, "This decision came after much thought and discussion with my family and friends. It did not come lightly and was definitely a difficult decision to make. No parent wants to lose a child, but to have the court step in and declare them deceased is just unfathomable." While waiting for the trial to start on July 29, 2024, Tanya wrote about her feelings, saying, quote, "At the end of the day, one person is responsible for the disappearance of my sons. That person at one point claimed the boys would hibernate until they graduate. As of today, June 14, 2024, all 3 boys are over 18 and all would have graduated high school. Yet they have not been returned to me and are still missing." The court legally declared all 3 boys dead. The boys, last seen on Thanksgiving evening wearing their pajamas, have never been found. John is scheduled to be released next year on November 29, 2025. Anyone with information regarding this case or the brothers' whereabouts are asked to call the Michigan State Police at 517-636-0689. There is a $60,000 reward being offered for information that helps authorities find Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner. Thank you for listening to Without a Trace with your host, Jolynn. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the Skelton Brothers' disappearance. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe and follow me on social media. Feel free to comment below what you think happened to the brothers. Join me next week as I dive into another case.